Hello everybody, it's me, Anita, with AnitaByDesign.com, and I am back with you today with another tutorial. And today's tutorial is an easy t-shirt dress. Now, for those of you who follow my blog, you saw last week that I created or made a bunch of t-shirt dresses for a Sewing for Haiti initiative that my sew sister Chandra initiated, and she blogs over at shundavis.com, so you can go check her out. So a bunch of us got together with her to sew clothing for children in Haiti. So we sewed up all of our clothing, sent the clothing to Chandra, and she's sending it off to the people who will be taking the clothing to Haiti. Now, what I chose to sew was an easy t-shirt dress because I knew I could crank out a bunch of those in no time. So I was able to make 9 before the deadline and send them off to Chandra. So I'm going to show you guys today how to make this t-shirt dress. And if you're new to sewing, you're going to love this project because it's very easy. You can sew it up in 1 hour and very minimal skills required. So come join me and let's sew a t-shirt dress. So let's get started with what you're going to need to make this dress. First, you're going to need a t-shirt, a child size t-shirt. And I picked up my t-shirt from Joann's Fabrics, and I used a 50% coupon, so I was able to get the shirt for $2.50. Now, the shirts that are the dresses that I made for the children in Haiti, I picked up all of my t-shirts from our local t-shirt mart, and I was able to get the shirts 3 for $10. So get your t-shirt, and then you're going to need fabric. You're going to need 100% cotton. Well, you don't need 100% cotton, but that's what I used. This is a flannel, and you can get between 1.5 and 1 yard depending on the length that you want your skirt to be on the dress. So we're going to measure, and I'll show you where we're going to measure, and you can decide, you know, how long you want to cut it. But I would go with 1.5 to 1 yard of fabric. Okay, you're going to need your fabric scissors. You're going to need a chalk roller, and if you don't have a chalk roller, you can use your tailor's chalk or a marking pen or a fabric pen to take your measurement. You're going to need your measuring tape. You're going to need some fusible interfacing, and I'll tell you when we get to that part what we're using it for. You're going to need some straight pins, of course, and you're going to need thread, a coordinating color or a contrasting color, whichever you choose. You're also going to need a bow. If you're choosing to make the little yo-yo that is pictured on the dress, the little flower looking thingy with the button, you're going to need a bowl, and choose a bowl that's double the size of the flower or the yo-yo that you want on your dress. And if you don't have a bowl, you can use anything that's circular shape, and then you're going to need a pencil to trace around the bowl. Okay, now those are the items that you're going to need. Now the next few items that I tell you about are optional, and that is your cutting mat, your rotary mat. If you want to use this to cut your fabric and to cut your t-shirt, you can use it along with your lip edge ruler and your rotary cutter. Now, I will be using these tools to cut my skirt, to cut the fabric for the skirt. So if you don't have these, it's okay. You can use your fabric scissors. One more thing that you will need, this is not optional, you will need a ruler. And you can use a clear ruler or you can use your yardstick. Okay, so those are the items that you'll need. So let's go ahead and start preparing the t-shirt. Okay, before we move on, I need to let you know that it is very important that you pre-treat your fabric and your t-shirt before you sew it together. So go ahead and take your fabric and your t-shirt, wash it in the washing machine like you will do after it's all sewn together, and then dry it and iron it flat or straight, you know, get all of the wrinkles out before you start the project. After you've done that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure and cut the t-shirt. Now, this is the t-shirt, and I have chosen to measure down from the underarm or the opening at the armhole down 3 inches. Now, you don't have to use that same measurement. You can use whichever measurement you choose. If you're not sure how far down you want the t-shirt to go, you can try it on the little girl that you're sewing for and measure from there and just insert a pin on one side, and then you will measure across to make your line. I'm going to use 3 inches. So I'm going to measure right here at the bottom of the armhole opening, down 3 inches, and then we're going to insert a pin just to hold the spot. Then we're going to go to the other side and we're going to do the same thing. From the bottom of the armhole opening and insert a pin right at the 3-inch mark. Okay, after you've done that, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to put it right on the edge where those pins are. And I'm going to remove that one. Make sure it's lined up with this pin and remove that one. Next, you're going to take your chalk roller or your tailor's chalk or your marking pen, whichever you chose to use, and we're just going to draw a line from one edge to the other. And make sure you hold your ruler in place or your yardstick, whichever you're using, to make sure it doesn't shift while you're marking the line. And go over any spots that you miss. Okay, so there's my line. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our fabric scissors and we're going to cut this bottom part off of the t-shirt. If you're using your rotary cutter and your rotary mat, you can go ahead and cut it off that way. So we're going to go ahead and cut. Now you can use this bottom portion if you'd like to make a little headband or whatever little accessory you want to make for the little girl. You could even probably make a little purse for her to match her dress. So go ahead and put that aside. And this is the t-shirt after it's cut off. Make sure if you have any jagged edges that you go back and clean that up, because we do need a clean edge for the t-shirt. Okay, next I want you to take a measurement of your t-shirt from one end to the next, and actually we're going to go ahead and use our tape measure for that. So take a measurement and I'm at about 16 5/8. I'm just going to round it to 17. So whatever your measurement is, you take that number and divide or multiply it by 2 and add 1/2 inch. So take the measurement, multiply it by 2 and add 1/2 inch. And with that measurement, you're going to cut your interfacing. With your interfacing, I want you to cut a strip, the measurement that you took for the bottom edge of your t-shirt. And then you need to make, or the width needs to be 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch by, or 1/2 inch wide, and the length should be the measurement you took from the t-shirt. And then we're going to actually sew or press this onto the bottom edge of the t-shirt. Now, let me tell you one thing that's very important for you to know. When you cut your interfacing, I want you to cut it the lengthwise or along the lengthwise selvage of your interfacing. Don't cut it crosswise, because the reason we're doing this is we want to prevent the t-shirt, the bottom edge of the t-shirt, from stretching while we're attaching the skirt to it. So when you take your interfacing and you pull it this way, if you get any amount of give, that's the crosswise selvage. And if you pull it the other way and you get no stretch, that's the lengthwise grain that I want you to cut on. So when you cut your length, remember the measurement that we took on the t-shirt, make sure you cut it on the lengthwise grain, or else you'll still get stretching on the t-shirt. So you go ahead and cut your strip, your interfacing strip, and then we're going to go ahead and press it onto our t-shirt. Okay, you should have cut your strip of interfacing, and what I need you to do is turn your t-shirt inside out. And I have mine placed on top of my ironing pad with the back of the t-shirt facing up, and the shirt is inside out. So you're going to take your interfacing strip and you're going to line it up even with the bottom edge of your t-shirt where we cut it. Just line it up evenly. Then we're going to take our press cloth, and I recommend using a press cloth whenever you're pressing your garment as you're sewing, especially when you're applying interfacing, fusible interfacing, to prevent the interfacing, the glue, from getting onto the sole plate of your iron. So I'm going to go ahead and wet that a little bit. If your iron doesn't have a spray function, you can just use a spray bottle to wet down the press cloth, and then we're just going to press. Make sure you don't use a back and forth or side to side motion. Just press the iron onto the fabric. Okay? Then we're going to turn the shirt, flatten out the edge, and we're going to continue placing the interfacing right on that edge as far as you can go, keeping it straight, and then we're going to press that down again. And I still have some residue of water. I'm just going to put a little bit more and then press. Not residue of water, but dampness on the press cloth. Okay. Let's go ahead and turn again. And for me, this will be the final turn. And we're going to line it up. Now see, I got the iron onto the part that's not on the shirt. I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. So if that happens to you, it's not a big deal. Just pull it back and then we'll reapply it. Okay, line it up. And now mine just meets, and it overlaps just a tiny bit, so that was a perfect cut. Now if yours happens to come up short, it's okay. Just go ahead and cut another strip to fill in the gap that you need. If yours ends up being much longer and you get much more of an overlap, then you just go ahead and clip off the extra before you press it down. Okay, so let's go ahead and press this last section. Okay, and we have our interfacing applied. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set this aside, and we're going to go ahead and start preparing the skirt. I'm going to say that again because that didn't work out. Okay, so where do we go? Okay, now we have our interfacing attached or applied to the t-shirt. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and prepare the skirt. So you can take your t-shirt and set it aside and get your fabric, and we're going to start cutting or measuring and cutting the fabric for the skirt. Okay, before we start measuring and cutting into the fabric for the skirt, I want you to check the selvage ends of your fabric to see if yours has a printed border like mine does. I purchased my fabric, as I told you earlier, from Joann's Fabrics, and it has information here on the edge about this fabric. So what I'm going to need you to do if yours has a border is to cut along that border to remove it so that the white space doesn't show up on the right side of the skirt when we sew it together. So go ahead and open out your fabric, and you're going to place it on your cutting mat if you're using one. If you're not using one, you're just going to use your fabric scissors and cut right along the edge of that border to remove it. Now, I'm going to move mine down. And I'm going to take my lip edge ruler. I'm going to line that up. And actually, I'm going to start down here, line it up, and remove the border. I'm going to move it down further so that I can complete that cut. And there we have a clean border now. Okay, so what I want you to do now is fold it back, and I want you to fold the edges together. So fold your edges together. Make sure we have a nice even piece here. Now, you're going to take the fold of your fabric, and what we need to do, not the fold, the edges of your fabric, and we're going to establish a straight edge. So determine which end is going to be the top portion of your skirt, the portion that we're going to attach to the t-shirt, because it's important to know that, because if your fabric is one-way directional, let's say all of the frogs were pointed in the same direction, we would have to make sure we cut our, or attach the top edge where the frogs' heads are to the bottom of the skirt, because we don't want the frogs sewn onto the skirt upside down. So take a look at your print on your fabric if you're using a print, and determine which is the top edge. So after you do that, we're going to establish a straight edge. If you're using scissors, then you can go ahead and take your ruler or your yardstick, line up the short edge with the ruler, and then take either a marking or a fabric pen or your chalk roller in a contrasting color that you can see, and then go ahead and mark a line all the way across the width of your fabric. And then you're going to take your fabric scissors and cut off that edge, and then that way you'll have a straight edge. I'm going to use my rotary cutter, so I'm going to take my lip edge ruler and I'm going to line it up with the fold of my fabric. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off that edge. Okay, so now I know that that's straight, and I'm going to measure from the top down to get the measurement that I need for the length. The skirt that I'm cutting is going to have a 15-inch finished length. So I'm going to cut my skirt 16.5 inches. Half an inch for the seam allowance that we are attaching the skirt to the t-shirt with, and a 1-inch hem, so 1.5 extra inches. So you determine how long you want your skirt, and then add 1.5 inch to that for your cutting length on the skirt. So I'm going to take the tape measure, and I'm going to measure down to 16.5, which is right here. Again, if you're using fabric scissors, go ahead and draw the line across the width of your fabric and then cut it with your fabric scissors. If you're using a rotary cutter, then go ahead and place it at the 16.5 mark. Don't really need that now. And you can also use the measurements, the numbers, the grid on your rotary cutter to take your measurement. And then we're just going to cut that off. So this is my skirt, and then go ahead and reserve the extras the extra fabric that you have left over in case you want to make the yo-yo to put onto the skirt, to embellish the skirt with. So we'll set that aside. Okay, now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to start preparing the skirt. Okay, I want you to take your fabric and fold it together with the right sides together, and I want you to match up the selvage ends. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew from the bottom edge of your skirt all the way to the top edge of your skirt. So if you need to, you can go ahead and insert a few pins to keep your two layers together. And then let's go ahead and insert it onto the machine. And I am using a regular straight stitch at a 2.5 length. and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and line your fabric up at the 1/2 inch mark on your needle plate. And then we're going to back stitch first. Let's back stitch and then stitch forward. And back stitch. Gonna clip off your thread tails on both ends. Now, I'm going to be using my serger to finish the seams on my dress. If you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch or whichever finish method you choose. So go ahead and finish your skirt, and I'm going to go ahead, or finish your seam allowance, and I'm going to go ahead and finish mine with the serger. So I'm going to place my fabric right along the edge here, and then just serge off that edge. Cut off the tails, and I have a very neat looking selvage or edge. Okay, so after you finish your seam allowance, then we're going to go to the sewing or to the pressing station, and you're going to press. Actually, I'm not going to go with you. I'm going to send you to the pressing station, and I want you to press your seam flat on both sides. So you're going to press it flat on this side and then turn it over and press it flat on that side. Then I want you to open up your skirt. Put it on your ironing board, and you're going to press your seam flat or to one side, okay? On this wrong side, and then you're going to turn it right side out, and you're going to press it flat on the outside. It's very important that you press while you're sewing so that you get very neat seams. Okay, so you go ahead and press the seam, and then meet me back here at the sewing machine. Okay, we have our seam pressed in neatly. The next step is we're going to insert a row of guide stitching at the hem of your skirt to guide us along as we're pressing up the hem before sewing it in. So go ahead and take the bottom edge of your skirt and insert it onto your machine at the 1 inch mark. Now, my machine only goes up to 6/8, 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I have established where the 1 inch mark is on my machine. So you will have to establish where that 1 inch mark is on your machine. And what I have done is I've pinpointed the place where the 1 inch mark is. For my machine, it's right here at these little dots. So I line up my fabric right along those little dots and sew along that edge. Now, what you can do to make it easier for you, especially if you're a beginner, once you establish where the 1 inch mark is, go ahead and put a piece of colored tape right along that line so that you can guide your fabric along that line as you're sewing to keep your line straight. Okay, so go ahead and find your 1 inch mark. And starting at the back seam, we're going to go ahead and insert the guide stitching all the way around. And you don't need to back stitch. And we're sewing a regular stitch at a 2.5 length. Okay, there we have our guide stitching. Okay, all the way around. Now, I want to take you to the pressing station so that I can show you how we're going to press this up. So I'll meet you there. All right, to press up our hem, we're going to turn the skirt inside out. And you're going to take the edge with the guide stitching on this, whichever end. If you're right-handed, it's going to be on your right hand. If you're left-handed, it's going to be on your left side. So looking at the guide stitching, you're going to turn your hem up along that guide stitching, and you want the guide stitching to show. So when you fold it over, you want it to show here on the wrong side of the skirt. We don't want that stitching to show on the front of the skirt. So make sure you turn it enough to where the guide stitching is showing on the back. And what's great about the guide stitching is you can feel it, and it gives you a little ridge. So when you're turning it over, you can feel where to turn over. And also, it helps you to keep your hem straight if you look at it, if you're following that guide stitching. Okay, so fold it over, and then you're going to take your iron and press. I'm going to use my press cloth, and I recommend you use yours as well. Okay, and then we're going to do that all the way around. So follow the guide stitching. You know, finger press it down, and then press it with your iron. Okay. If you don't, this is a press cloth that I purchased at Joann's Fabrics. You don't have to purchase a press cloth. You can use any type of 100% cotton fabric. You can use muslin. You can use organza. I just recommend using something to protect your fabric so that you don't burn it or get shine marks on it, because some fabrics will leave a shine mark when you're pressing on top of them. Okay, now what we're going to do is, you can do this two ways. We're going to open out the fold that we just pressed in, and we're going to take the raw edge and fold it in to the guide stitching to where the raw edge meets the guide stitch right at the fold. Okay? And then fold it over again, and you're creating a double fold, and then you will just go around and do that. But what I find easier is, after you press in that first fold, I just go through and pinch and push the raw edge right to that fold. And that's, for me, a lot quicker. So I just take that edge and push it into the fold, just like that. And then you can go and press. And then you're going to do the same thing all the way around your skirt. So go ahead and push that raw edge into the fold, just like that. And press. So I want you to go ahead and continue pressing in your fold all the way around the skirt, and then I will meet you at the sewing machine and we will go ahead and sew in the hem. Okay, I went ahead and inserted the stitching for the hem, and what you're going to do is, and I'm sorry, the reason I didn't show you guys is because we actually recorded it being done, but we forgot to turn on the sound. So I just wanted to show you guys what I did. Okay, you're going to, my husband did it. You're going to insert your fabric, and you can sew your hem in on the right side of the fabric, or you can do it on the wrong side. It doesn't matter. I sewed mine from the right side. So go ahead and insert your fabric, and you're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and starting at the back seam of the skirt, go ahead and sew starting and ending with a back stitch. So sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. If you're sewing from the right side of your fabric, you want to make sure that you take your finger and feel along the ridge, the fold that we have on the inside of the skirt, to make sure that your needle is falling inside that fold, because if it falls outside of that fold, you're not catching it and sewing in your hem. So go ahead and sew in your seam all the way around the skirt, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to insert 2 rows of basting stitches on the top edge, the top raw edge of the skirt, and we're going to use those basting stitches to gather the skirt when we attach it to the t-shirt. Go ahead and insert your fabric at the 3/8 inch seam line, and the reason we're sewing the first row at a 3/8 inch is because we don't want to have the basting stitches showing on the right side of the skirt if you choose not to remove your basting stitches. I won't be removing my basting stitches. I will just be serging them in with the finished hem. So we're going to sew at a 3/8 inch seam, and oops, let's raise that back up. You want to change to a basting stitch and then go ahead and baste or stitch. I always like to tell my beginners, whenever you're sewing a seam and you have to stop to adjust your fabric, make sure that the needle is down in the fabric before you adjust, to make sure you don't move your fabric and get a crooked line when you continue sewing. Now we're going to stop right before we meet that beginning stitching, all right? And then we're going to pull it out, and we're going to pull it long enough to where we have tails long enough to pull up the gathering stitches. And then you're going to do the same thing on your second row of stitching, but for the second row, you're going to sew inside that seam allowance close to the first row of stitching. So go ahead and insert another row of gathering stitches, and then meet me back here, and then we'll prepare the skirt and the t-shirt to be sewn together. Okay, to divide the skirt into fourths to attach it to our t-shirt, we're going to take the seam, the back seam of the skirt, and pinch it, fold it right there, right on that seam. Then we're going to fold our skirt in half like that. Okay, so you have your seam here. On the opposite end, you're going to take a pin and insert it right there at the fold. Or if you'd like, you can use your nippers and just snip a little notch in there. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take the seam and match it up with that pin. And then we're going to fold our skirt in half the other direction. And then we're going to put a pin in this fold, or you can notch it. Let's try that again. I lost it. Insert your pin. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Line up the seam with that pin. And then insert your pin at that fold. Okay, now set this aside, and we're going to do the same thing with the t-shirt. So take your t-shirt and turn it right side out. And first we're going to just flatten it out and make sure that the fold is right here at the underarm seam. And we're going to go ahead and insert our pins on both sides. Or again, you can snip a notch if that's easier. I'm going to use the pins because they're easier to see for recording purposes. Then we're going to take those two pins, match them up together at the center, and then we're going to fold again so that we can establish the center front and the center back of the t-shirt. Okay. Okay, now we have divided our shirt into fourths and our skirt into fourths. Now, take your skirt and turn your skirt wrong side out. And then place it in front of you with the seam on the top, with the seam facing up. Okay, then you're going to open it up like that. Okay, and then you're going to take your t-shirt and you're going to take the back of your t-shirt. This is the back. Take that pin on the back and match it to the seam on the right side of the skirt. So the right side should be facing. This is the center back of the t-shirt and the center back of the skirt. Pin those together. Then we're going to take the shirt and insert it and open it out. Now we're going to match the center front of the t-shirt and the center front of the dress. So I'm going to remove one pin and then pin that together. And then we're going to go ahead and match up the sides. Both sides. Okay, so this is what you should have. This is what it should look like. Okay. Your skirt is attached to the shirt at 4 points, and you have this extra fabric on your skirt. And that's what our thread tails are for. We're going to gather the skirt by pulling these threads. So we're going to gather 1/2 of the skirt at a time. So take 1/2, and wait, before you do that, we got to find the thread tails for this half of the skirt. So take a pin. I need my glasses again. Take a pin and find those threads, and then move the rest out of the way. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to be pulling my threads from the wrong side. So I'm only pulling the threads from the wrong side, not from the right side and the wrong side. So the threads here I'm pulling. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to pull and then distribute those gathers. Pull and distribute the gathers. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push these gathers past this pin because we need to gather this whole side. So I'm going to push, and don't worry about doing anything to your pin. The gathers will push right past the pin. Okay, see that? They push right past the pin. So let's gather a little bit more. You don't need much for this size that I'm showing. There's going to be very little gathering. So this is not a full skirt. If you want a full skirt, then you would need to purchase more fabric and cut 2 panels and sew them together. Okay? So there you have it. Now I'm going to take this section, okay, and now you see that the t-shirt is bigger. So that means I have to distribute my gathers and spread them out and push some of them to the other side, so that enough to where this shirt is going to lie flat against the gathers before we pin and sew it together. Okay, so just distribute your gathers, and like I said, very few gathers on my skirt. Okay, now that's flat enough to where I can go ahead and pin to prepare it for sewing. And then you will insert as many pins as you feel necessary before sewing in your gathers. Okay, now on this side it's already gathered, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute the gathers and remove some of them to make it even with my t-shirt. And I think that's about right. So I'm going to pin in the center first, and then over to the side, and continue moving around your gathers as necessary so that you get it evenly gathered all the way around. Okay, so 1/2 of my skirt is gathered. Now, I want you to go and do the same thing on the other half. And after you do that, meet me back here, and we're going to sew the seam together so that the skirt is attached to the shirt. Okay, now that we have our skirt all gathered and attached to the t-shirt, we're going to sew in a seam, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and insert your fabric at the 1/2 inch seam line and backstitch, and sew that seam all the way around to the other side. Making sure that your gathers are not being sewn into folds as you're going along. If you have to readjust gathers while you're sewing, just use your finger to reposition them. And then backstitch. Now again, I'm going to be using my serger to finish off my raw edge. You can use whichever method you want to use. If you are using a zigzag stitch, make sure you go ahead and insert another row of stitching, straight stitching, right inside of the seam allowance, close to the first row of stitching that you did, just to secure it. Okay, so go ahead and finish your raw edge, and then I will meet you at the pressing station. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press our seam allowance flat all the way around the skirt. So go ahead and take your press cloth and just press it flat all the way around. Press it flat, and then we're going to go ahead and open it out, turn this dress right side or wrong side out, inside out, and then we're going to place the dress on the ironing board, and we're going to press our seam allowance toward the t-shirt all the way around. Take your press cloth, making sure the seam allowance is flat. And what I like to do is I like to tug on the hem just a little bit to make sure I'm not folding or pressing in a fold. So I'll tug. Okay. So tug it a little bit and then press in your fold, or press the seam flat. And then you're going to do that all the way around. And after you do that, you're going to turn it right side out and do the same thing. So turn it right side out, place it on your ironing board, and then go around and press the seam allowance flat on the right side. And then after you do that, meet me back at the sewing machine, and we're going to insert a top stitch on the top of the t-shirt to keep that seam allowance flat. Okay, go ahead and press your seam allowance and meet me at the sewing machine. Okay, we have attached the t-shirt to the skirt, and this is what we have so far. Now the next thing we're going to do is insert the top stitching. So take your skirt, starting from the back. Your dress is a dress now. So go ahead and insert the dress from the bottom right at the back center seam, and we're going to insert a row of stay stitching. And again, you can feel that ridge where the seam allowance ends. We don't want to go outside of that ridge. We want to be right on top of that ridge. And for my machine, I'm going to line it up the edge of my presser foot. I'm going to line up the edge of my presser foot with the seam right here where the t-shirt and the skirt meet, and that ensures that my needle falls right onto the seam allowance. Okay, so you find where your needle falls onto the seam allowance, and then go ahead and stitch around, starting and ending with the back stitch. Making sure as you're sewing along that the seam allowance is toward the skirt. If for some reason it flips or the shirt, if it flips toward the skirt, just make sure you're feeling along the way to make sure it's on the right side. We're coming up on the beginning of the stitching. Okay, you're going to meet that stitching and then back stitch. And there you have a nice neat row of top stitching, which really gives it a nice finished look. Okay? There you have it. Now, if you would like to embellish the front of your skirt, you can use anything. You can use the yo-yo that I used for my dress, and I'm going to show you in a second how to do that. Or you can use a purchased flower, or you can make a bow out of this fabric to put there, or whichever fabric you choose. You can put a pin, whatever you want to use to embellish. You can even make a sash for her dress and tie a nice little bow in the front or the back. So you embellish it however you choose. If you are not embellishing it, then you're done. Okay, if you'd like to make the yo-yo, then meet me at the cutting table and I'll show you how to prepare that. Okay, let's prepare the yo-yo. You're going to take your fabric, turn it over to the wrong side, then take your bowl and place it upside down on top of your fabric, and then you're going to trace around the bowl with your pencil. Okay, then we're going to cut out the circle. And you'll notice I'm turning the fabric, not my scissors. It's easier that way. Okay, now you're going to need your needle and thread, and thread your needle with a long string of thread. You don't need to knot the ends. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle and you're going to weave it in and out around the edge of the circle. So you're going to go in, out, in, out. Try to get even intervals as close as you possibly can. So in, out, and I'm going to say maybe, I don't know, little less than half an inch I'm using, or my intervals are. In, out, all the way around until you meet the beginning. Oops. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's as close as you can get it to even as as you can. Okay. And just continue that all the way around. Lost my spot. Okay. And then keep going. And also try to keep it even along the edge. Like you don't want to insert one here and one here and one there. You want to try to keep it as even as you can away from the edge all the way around. We're almost there. Okay, now here is the first strand. I'm going to go in again and come back out meeting that first strand, or the where I began. Okay, keeping your needle threaded, you're going to go ahead and pull both strings. Oh, we got a loose thread here, so just pull that until it meets. Just go ahead and pull it. It'll all draw in. So you're going to pull it and it's going to draw in to make a little bowl shape, and just keep pulling until you get something that looks like this. Okay, and when you get there, you're going to pull it tight, and you can either take two strings and tie them together like that, or you can just separate the strings and tie them together, or you can tie a knot here with both strings. So I'm going to go around and tie a knot. And I'm going to do that again and tie a knot. Okay, now what I'm going to do, you'll see these loose strings here. Don't worry about those. We're going to cut those away at the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to weave all the way through the folds. And what I'm doing, the reason I'm doing that is because I want to secure those folds to make sure they don't come apart once it's attached to the dress. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to insert it in the fold and just keep going through the folds, as many as I can at one time. And then I'm going to pull through. And what I prefer is to have double thread when I do that. So pull your thread until you have a double row of thread. Okay, so go ahead and push your needle through the folds and pull. And now I have my double layer, and that's stronger than the single layer. So continue inserting your needle through the double folds all the way until you get back to the beginning. And it's gathering it up even more and stronger. Okay, in the folds and pull. In the folds, and we're back to the beginning, and I'm going to pull, and this time I'm not going to put in a knot. I'm going to take the thread and insert it through the center and pull it back, and then it's going to give me even more security. Okay, I'm going to come back up. And I have this thread there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away these loose threads. Any loose threads you have, not your main thread, but any loose threads you have, go ahead and cut those away. And then if you're inserting a button, you don't have to. You can leave your yo-yo just like this if you like, but I think it adds a little bit more cuteness when you add a button. So I'm going to take my button, okay, and I'm going to insert the thread through there first. And then I'm just going to go ahead and sew the button onto the yo-yo. Okay. Oops. So I'm going to just go in and out until the button is attached. So I'm going to go back and forth here until I have the thickness that I desire, and then I'm going to go crosswise back and forth until I have the thickness I desire. And then I'm going to take this yo-yo and I'm going to place it on the dress wherever I want. I chose to place it right at the seam between the skirt and the t-shirt for my dresses. You can place it up here if you'd like. You can place it wherever you want. You can center it and put a little sash. So go ahead and finish your yo-yo, attach it to your skirt, and then you will be done. I'll meet you back here at the cutting table. Okay, you guys, we are done with our t-shirt dress, and this is what we've created. Is that the cutest? I love it. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you will be making lots of t-shirt dresses for your little girls and your friends and your granddaughters, nieces. If you'd like to see more photos, if you actually like to see beautiful photos of you little girls wearing these dresses, you can check out my blog at anitabydesign.com. I am posting a few photos after or at the end of this tutorial for you to see, but you can see a lot more on my blog. And if you'd like to see the post that I did last week for the Sewing for Haiti initiative, you can see that on my blog also. Thank you so much for following. Thank you for subscribing if you like what you see here. And I will see you guys next time. And remember, until then, when you live in your design, it is from there that God shines. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.